Right now, in the gentle, inviting warmth of midsummer, countless gardeners are stepping out onto their peaceful patios, relaxing on their balconies, or walking into their backyards with a morning cup of coffee in hand, only to look at their beloved clematis vines with a sudden, sinking feeling of disappointment. If your clematis was putting on an absolutely spectacular, breathtaking show back in the cooler days of late spring, treating you to those massive, vibrant, velvety blossoms that completely transform an outdoor space and bring so much daily joy to your life, you might be feeling a bit confused and perhaps even a little concerned right now. Because now that we have reached the deep, heavy heat of July, you have likely noticed a dramatic shift. Those abundant, brilliant flowers have probably thinned out significantly.
The climbing vine itself seems to have completely stalled in its tracks, refusing to push out any new green growth. Or perhaps the once lush leaves are just looking a little tired, worn out, and noticeably less vibrant than they did just a month ago. If this scenario sounds incredibly familiar to you, please take a deep, comforting breath. Relax your shoulders, and do not assume that something is terribly wrong with your beautiful plant. In the vast majority of cases, your clematis is doing exactly what it is biologically programmed and supposed to do at this specific, hot point in the summer growing season. The real problem, the thing that actually jeopardizes the long-term health and beauty of the plant, is almost never what the clematis is naturally doing on its own. Instead, the danger lies in what well-meaning, deeply caring gardeners do next in response to these completely natural seasonal changes.
We all want to help our garden plants thrive, especially the ones we have carefully tended to on our patios and balconies. And when we see them slowing down or looking exhausted, our natural protective instincts immediately kick in. Some folks immediately grab the heavy watering can and flood the plant with excess water every single evening, absolutely convinced that the vine must be desperately thirsty in the intense summer heat. Others head straight to the garden shed or the garage, mix up a strong, heavy batch of high nitrogen fertilizer, and drench the potting soil, hoping beyond hope to artificially force the vine into pushing out just one more round of bright summer blooms. And some gardeners, perhaps feeling a bit defeated by the tired appearance of the plant, take their sharp pruners and cut the vine back aggressively, deciding that the plant has simply failed and is finished for the entire year.
Every single one of those very natural, nurturing instincts actually causes a very specific, hidden problem for the clematis. And in the case of one particular, highly alarming symptom that frequently shows up on those stunning, large-flowered varieties we all love so much, misreading the signs and overreacting can literally cost you months of beautiful, healthy growth that you absolutely did not need to lose. It can even quietly and permanently rob you of next year's spectacular flowers before you ever realize what happened. Today, we are going to change that narrative entirely. And we are going to do it in a way that is easy, gentle, and perfectly suited for a relaxed lifestyle. We are going to step back, slow down our pace, and learn how to properly read the gentle body language of your clematis.
I am going to walk you through exactly what your clematis actually needs from you this month, and we will talk about how to provide that care without any heavy lifting, without any stressful garden chores, and without relying on harsh, complicated chemical treatments. I have spent years working closely with these magnificent climbing vines, often gently restoring beautiful plants that others had completely given up on and considered dead. The real difference between a luxurious climbing wall of flowers on your balcony and a struggling wilted bush in a pot does not come down to buying the most expensive, heavily marketed fertilizers. And it certainly does not require you to spend hours doing back-breaking, exhausting physical labor in the hot summer sun. It comes down to understanding just a few simple, highly sensible rules for summer care and learning how to peacefully partner with your plant rather than constantly trying to fix it or force it to perform. Let us explore these wonderfully easy, highly practical steps together at a nice, relaxed pace so you can fully enjoy your beautiful outdoor space, save your energy, and set your container gardens and patio borders up for absolute, guaranteed success year after year. Let us begin with the absolute foundation of the plant, which is always the most logical and effective place to start when we are talking about long-term plant health and vitality. We need to have a detailed, thoughtful conversation about what is happening beneath the soil surface right now, whether your plant is in a traditional garden bed or settling into a large, decorative container on your deck. Almost every gardener who has ever purchased or planted a clematis has heard the classic, time-honored gardening rule. You must keep the head in the sun and the feet in the shade.
It is a wonderful, catchy phrase that has been passed down for generations. But the fundamental issue is that most people only apply half of that advice. They take great care to make sure the vine is placed somewhere it can easily climb up into the glorious, bright afternoon sunshine to successfully produce those stunning, colorful flowers we all adore. But then, once the plant is firmly in the ground or situated in its patio pot, they stop thinking about the critical root zone entirely. This becomes a massive, often critical oversight, specifically as we move deep into the hot, unforgiving month of July. To truly understand why this matters so incredibly much, and why it is the secret to a thriving plant, we have to look closely at how a clematis is biologically built beneath the soil. Unlike towering trees or large, established, deep-rooted woody shrubs that can reach far, far down into the cool, dark earth to find hidden moisture and relief from the baking summer sun, a clematis naturally develops a very shallow, incredibly delicate network of fine feeder roots. These essential, highly sensitive roots sit dangerously close to the absolute top surface of the soil. When the intense, direct afternoon sun beats down on your garden beds, or worse, when it heavily bakes the sides of your plastic or ceramic patio containers, it heats up that top layer of soil incredibly fast. The ambient temperature might feel comfortably warm to you sitting in the shade, but on a bright July afternoon, the physical soil right around those delicate, life-sustaining roots can get noticeably and uncomfortably hotter than the air above it. The situation is often magnified on balconies or paved patios, where the hard surfaces absorb the sun's rays all day and fiercely radiate that trapped heat directly back up into the bottom and sides of your plant containers, essentially cooking the root system from all directions. When those shallow roots overheat, the entire plant immediately enters a state of hidden, silent stress. It does not immediately wilt or dramatically drop all of its leaves, which is exactly why this specific problem goes completely unnoticed for so long by so many casual gardeners. Instead, the plant responds in very quiet, subtle ways that do not look obviously or directly related to heat at all. You might step out onto your balcony one quiet morning and simply notice that flower production has completely and inexplicably slowed down. You might observe that the beautiful textured leaves are slowly losing some of their rich, vibrant, deep green color, gradually taking on a duller, more washed-out, tired appearance. You might notice that any new, eager green shoots are growing much, much more slowly than they absolutely should be during the active, warm summer season. And during a severe, prolonged heat wave, you might even see with disappointment that the tiny, promising new flower buds completely fail to develop properly, prematurely drying up and turning brown before they ever have the wonderful chance to open. Many well-intentioned gardeners see these exact symptoms and instantly, understandably, assume the plant is starving for heavy nutrients, or perhaps dying of some mysterious, invisible disease. But more often than not, the plant is simply, desperately trying to survive an uncomfortably hot root zone. The truly wonderful, reassuring news here is that the absolute best fix for this widespread problem is incredibly easy, exceptionally gentle on your back and knees, and does not involve digging up or aggressively moving the heavy plant at all. The elegant solution is proper, mindful, strategic insulation. If your beautiful clematis is planted directly in the ground, you want to carefully apply a soothing, protective, 2 to 3 inch layer of high-quality organic mulch entirely around the wide base of the plant. You can easily use light, shredded bark, rich, crumbly garden compost, or even well-rotted leaf mold if you have it available. This wonderful layer of organic matter acts exactly like a thick, protective blanket, brilliantly insulating the precious, vulnerable soil from the harsh, baking rays of the sun, and firmly holding in the cool, life-giving moisture that the shallow roots desperately crave on a hot day.
However, there is one very important, strictly non-negotiable detail you must absolutely remember when doing this gentle task. You must intentionally weave a small, clear, completely open gap of bare soil right around the actual crown or the main woody stems of the plant. Piling thick, heavy, damp mulch directly against those soft, sensitive stems will instantly trap moisture against the wood, which severely restricts natural airflow and quietly, inevitably, invites devastating fungal problems that can tragically rot the entire plant right from the base up. It is a simple adjustment. Just use your hands or a small hand trowel to gently pull the mulch away from the center, creating a small breathing ring around the stems. Now, if you are lovingly growing your clematis in a large, heavy container on your deck, patio, or balcony, as so many of us do to keep our gardening manageable and close to home, applying heavy mulch might not be the most practical or aesthetically pleasing solution. The sides of that decorative pot are constantly absorbing heat all day long, transferring it directly to the soil inside. You can beautifully and effortlessly protect those sensitive roots by simply placing a few smaller, lightweight, decorative potted plants directly in front of the main clematis container. By arranging a few cheerful pots of colorful annuals or leafy greens right in the path of the afternoon sun, you easily cast a cooling, protective shadow entirely over the soil surface and the heated sides of the clematis pot. It requires no digging, no heavy bags of soil, just a pleasant, creative few minutes of rearranging your patio display. Furthermore, many highly experienced, deeply relaxed gardeners absolutely love to plant low-growing, friendly companion plants right around the very base of the clematis itself, sharing the same soil. Beautiful, incredibly easy care, low-maintenance options like hardy, resilient geraniums, lovely, lush, wide-leaved hostas, or cascading, creeping phlox are absolutely perfect for this specific job. By thoughtfully planting these friendly, leafy neighbors at the base, you are essentially creating a living, breathing, actively growing mulch. You are very carefully not shading the tall, climbing vine itself. Instead, you are intentionally, strategically shading its sensitive root system with a beautiful carpet of green leaves. And those cool, deeply protected, comfortable roots are exactly what the plant fundamentally needs to safely, happily, and comfortably navigate the intense July heat without shutting down its growth. It takes just a few peaceful minutes of very easy seated work to set up this gorgeous protection, and your grateful clematis will reliably thank you with stronger, happier, far more vigorous growth as the season beautifully progresses. Once we have successfully made absolutely sure that the delicate roots are perfectly cool, well protected, and deeply comfortable in their environment, we can slowly move our attention further up the winding vine to the glorious flowers themselves. If you happen to be growing a repeat blooming variety of clematis, which are incredibly popular for patio containers because they offer so much color. Managing the old fading flowers is the absolute single easiest, most effective way to guarantee and gently encourage a second, completely beautiful flush of rich color later in the late summer or early autumn season. As passionate gardeners, we understandably love to sit back and admire the open blooms. But to truly care for the plant without stressing it, we have to clearly understand what the plant is actively trying to achieve on a biological level. The very moment a spectacular, fully open clematis flower begins to naturally fade, slowly lose its vibrant color, and eventually drop its soft petals, the plant immediately shifts its internal priorities. It completely and instantly stops putting its valuable stored energy into making any new colorful flowers, and instead, it starts pouring absolutely all of its internal resources, water, and nutrients into producing dense seed heads. You have highly likely seen these curious structures on your vines before. They are those fascinating, fluffy, silvery, almost alien-looking, wiry seed heads that prominently appear much later in the season. Now let me be very clear and fair. Those unique seed heads are genuinely beautiful in their own highly unique textural way, and they can add wonderful, interesting visual appeal to a late autumn garden, especially when they catch the morning frost. But the strict biological reality is that manufacturing those complex seeds costs the living plant a tremendous, almost exhausting amount of energy and precious limited resources. Every single ounce of energy that goes directly into maturing a seed head is an ounce of energy that could otherwise be beautifully directed right back into pushing out fresh, new, vigorous climbing shoots, or thoughtfully developing a second, breathtaking round of late summer flowers for you to enjoy. This is exactly where a very gentle, simple, and incredibly rewarding practice called deadheading becomes so incredibly valuable and absolutely essential for the patio gardener who wants maximum color with minimum fuss. Now, this absolutely does not mean that you ever need to rush out in a panicked frenzy and meticulously, obsessively strip every single spent bloom off the entire vine the very second it starts to look a tiny bit tired. Gardening should never feel like a frantic chore.
If you happen to deeply enjoy the wild, natural look of those ornamental seed heads in the fall, by all means, leave a few of them safely on the plant to enjoy as the seasons slowly change. But for those magnificent, highly bred, large-flowered hybrids that naturally possess the wonderful genetic ability to produce two distinct, separate flowering periods a year, this specific midsummer window is the critical, deciding time that completely determines whether or not you actually get to see that second, glorious flush of blooms. The physical process of deadheading is incredibly simple, beautifully relaxing, requires absolutely zero heavy lifting, and it gives you a wonderful, peaceful excuse to spend a quiet, slow morning simply inspecting and enjoying your garden space. Take a small, comfortable pair of clean, sharp garden snips or lightweight bypass pruners. Slowly follow the thin green stem of the faded, petalless flower downward with your fingers.
You are simply looking for the very first strong, healthy, solid pair of leaves situated directly beneath that old flower. Once you easily find that sturdy, visible leaf joint, you simply make one clean, gentle, decisive cut just a fraction of an inch above it. That is it. That one single, completely effortless cut instantly interrupts the plant's seed-making process. It takes all of that valuable stored energy that the plant was just about to waste on seed production and gracefully, naturally redirects it right back toward creating new, lush, flowering growth. Now, it is highly important to take a brief, calm moment and acknowledge exactly what kind of clematis you are actually growing. Because, as with all living things, they do not all behave the exact same way. Not every single clematis variety needs this specific snipping treatment. Some very lovely older heritage varieties are perfectly content to flower just once in a massive, glorious display in the early spring season, and then they are totally done blooming for the rest of the year, regardless of how much you thoughtfully prune them. Others are highly vigorous, non-stop blooming machines that will happily flower continuously on fresh new growth all summer long with very little help or intervention from us. I know very well that keeping track of complicated botanical plant names, specific Latin classifications, and confusing pruning groups can sometimes feel deeply overwhelming and frustrating, especially if you have simply lost the little plastic tags that originally came inserted in the nursery pots years ago. Please, I urge you, do not worry or stress for a single moment if you cannot remember exactly which specific type you currently have growing on your patio. Gardening is about patient observation, not rigid perfection. If you do not know which type is currently growing on your trellis, simply try deadheading just a few of the faded blooms on one side of the plant, and simply sit back and watch how the plant naturally responds over the next few gentle weeks. And the very next time you visit your favorite local nursery or garden center to buy a new exciting plant for your collection, take a quick, intentional second to save that little plastic plant tag. Keep it tucked safely away in a small garden notebook, or simply drop it into a designated envelope in a handy kitchen drawer. It becomes genuinely useful, incredibly time-saving information months or even years later when these exact little pruning decisions come up again in the garden. But for right now, just deeply enjoy the peaceful, meditative process of lightly tidying up the vine and gently, kindly encouraging it to push out a few more blooms for your patio enjoyment. As you are taking those few, incredibly quiet, peaceful minutes to snip away the faded flowers with your pruners, you actually have the absolute perfect, convenient opportunity to perform another incredibly easy, highly satisfying, yet vastly overlooked midsummer garden task. We absolutely need to talk about properly guiding the new, soft, flexible growth of the vine right now while it is still highly pliable and cooperative, instead of struggling, fighting, and wrestling with stiff, unyielding woody stems much later in the year. It is a very common, entirely understandable tendency for a gardener to look at a large, mature clematis and immediately assume that the thick, older, brown, heavily woody stems near the very bottom are the essential parts of the plant that desperately need our constant attention and structural support.
But those thick, tough stems are already deeply established. They are incredibly strong on their own, and they are absolutely not our primary concern in the middle of a hot July. We need to shift our focus and look upward. We deeply need to look at the fragile, constantly reaching, delicate growing tips at the very edge of the vine. During periods of active, warm summer growth, those incredibly soft, highly delicate, bright green shoots can quietly, almost invisibly extend several inches in a single sunny week. They are fast, they are incredibly eager, and they are constantly, desperately looking blindly for absolutely anything they can tightly grab onto for safety. A clematis climbs in a very unique, highly specialized, and biologically beautiful way. It doesn't have sticky, adhering pads that ruin your brickwork like common ivy, and it doesn't spiral and strangle its entire main stem around a pole like a heavy morning glory.
Instead, it climbs by intelligently wrapping its specialized leaf stalks which botanists call petioles, entirely around anything that is physically thin enough for them to tightly and securely grip. They will instinctively reach out and twine themselves around a piece of thin garden wire, a length of natural rustic jute twine, the narrow metal rungs of a decorative patio trellis, or even a neighboring friendly branch from a nearby garden shrub. This delicate, fascinating wrapping action is exactly how the plant safely secures itself against the pulling forces of gravity and the sudden, violent gusts of summer wind. But if we do not intentionally step in and gently, thoughtfully guide these eager little shoots while they are still soft, highly pliable, and cooperative, they will inevitably and frustratingly tangle entirely around each other. They will slowly form a heavy, messy, incredibly dense knot of green growth at the very, very top of your trellis or arbor, leaving the entire bottom half of the beautiful support structure completely bare, empty, and unattractive. And even worse when a sudden, violent summer thunderstorm rolls in, complete with heavy rain and harsh, unpredictable winds. Those strong whipping winds can easily twist, severely damage, or completely snap those heavy, tangled clusters of fragile green stems right off the plant. Once those exact same green stems naturally harden, age, and transition into stiff, inflexible woody growth later in the autumn season, trying to physically reposition them, bend them, or untangle that messy knot becomes incredibly difficult, highly frustrating, and it almost always, sadly, results in breaking the stem completely in half, ruining a whole season's worth of growth. We absolutely want to avoid that unnecessary stress, both for you and for the beloved plant.
So, as you are simply sitting out and enjoying your patio with your morning tea or evening glass of water, take a few leisurely, deeply pleasant minutes every week or two to simply inspect your vine. When you spot those fresh, eager green shoots blindly reaching out into the empty air, gently, carefully lift them with your bare hands and deliberately direct them toward the completely open, empty sections of your trellis or support structure. Strongly encourage them to spread out horizontally, moving side to side, rather than just letting them race straight up vertically to the absolute top. If you feel you really need to actively secure a loose, floppy stem to keep it safe from the breeze, always use the softest, most gentle ties possible. You can easily use small pieces of soft, natural twine, specialized, reusable fuzzy garden Velcro, or even simple, free strips cut from an old, soft cotton t-shirt. But whatever material you ultimately choose to use, please constantly remember to keep the ties incredibly loose, leaving plenty of breathing room. Clematis stems naturally thicken surprisingly fast during the warm, active growing season as they pump water upwards. A tight, highly restrictive plastic or wire tie will literally strangle or girdle the growing stem as it inevitably attempts to grow wider, completely and tragically cutting off the vital flow of essential water and nutrients to the entire top half of the beautiful vine. This one simple, highly relaxing habit of providing gentle, horizontal guidance pays off in a truly spectacular, highly visual way that most casual gardeners simply do not even notice until years later when they see the stunning results.
Instead of having every single beautiful, colorful flower clustered tightly in a heavy, messy bunch at the very top of the trellis, where you can barely even see them from your patio chair, you will brilliantly encourage a magnificent, breathtaking display of blooms that are distributed perfectly and evenly from the very base of the plant all the way up to the top. It creates that lush, highly professional, completely storybook look that we all deeply want for our personal patio gardens. And it takes absolutely nothing more than a few minutes of pleasant, stress-free, seated observation each and every week. Now, as we continue our calm, highly observant, peaceful walk around the patio garden, I want to share a deeply valuable secret that professional nursery growers rely on heavily, yet it is rarely discussed in basic gardening books. We need to actively learn how to read the leaves of the plant, well before we ever start worrying or panicking about the temporary flowers. Flowers, while undeniably beautiful and the main reason we grow these plants, are ultimately temporary. They come and go with the fleeting seasons. But the leaves, the lush green foliage, stay firmly attached on the vine for many, many months at a time, working quietly and tirelessly in the background to capture sunlight and feed the roots. This simple biological fact makes the leaves one of the absolute best, most highly reliable, and earliest indicators of exactly how your clematis is actually feeling, functioning, and performing in its environment. A perfectly healthy, deeply satisfied clematis leaf is noticeably firm to the gentle touch, evenly and richly colored in a beautiful shade of green, and generally completely free of any unusual spotting, heavy blemishes, or strange textures. But plants absolutely communicate with us through their foliage, and we just need to patiently learn to translate their silent language. For a highly common example, if you look down at the very base of your large, mature vine and notice that the older, larger leaves near the very bottom are starting to slowly turn a pale yellow, while the fresh, new, eager growth way up at the top remains wonderfully healthy, crisp, and vibrant, please do completely relax and do not worry for a single moment. In almost every single case, that is simply the entirely normal, natural aging process of a growing plant. As the climbing vine aggressively pushes higher and higher toward the sun, it intelligently and strategically redirects its limited energy and valuable internal nutrients strictly upward to fully support the vital new growth, allowing those oldest, heavily shaded, less efficient leaves at the absolute bottom to naturally fade, yellow, and quietly drop off. It is absolutely not a problem for you to solve. It is not a disease. It is just remarkable nature gracefully taking its course. However, if you happen to notice that uniform, pale yellowing leaves are suddenly appearing all across the entire climbing vine, evenly from the very top to the very bottom, that specific symptom tells a completely different, much more urgent story. This widespread general paleness usually points directly to an underlying, hidden issue deep within the root zone. It could potentially be a basic, simple nutrient imbalance, a prolonged, highly stressful period of severe drought, where the potting soil has simply gotten far too dry for far too long. Or, very commonly in patio gardens, it could be that the older potting soil in your container has slowly become heavily compacted over time, physically restricting the tender roots from taking up the vital oxygen and water they desperately need to function. If you closely observe leaves with distinct brown, crispy, severely dry edges, that specific symptom typically shows up immediately after a long stretch of intense, punishing summer heat, especially if the vulnerable plant was subjected to highly inconsistent, unpredictable watering during that painfully hot spell. And if you ever spot very distinct, white, powdery, dusty patches lightly covering the top surface of the green leaves, that immediately points to a highly common airborne fungal issue called powdery mildew. This frustrating mildew is especially common in late summer, particularly in enclosed, sheltered areas of the patio or garden where the natural, cooling airflow around the dense vine is poor, trapped, and stagnant. But here is the absolute most important, deeply reassuring piece of advice I can possibly give you regarding any of these frightening foliar issues. Before you ever rush out to the busy garden center to buy a complicated, highly toxic chemical treatment or a heavy, messy spray, take a deep, calming breath and simply check the actual physical growing conditions first. Is a nearby overgrown shrub or a sprawling large perennial severely crowding the very base of the vine, completely blocking the gentle, drying breeze? Is the heavy potting soil in your patio pot staying constantly wet, muddy, and soggy because the bottom drainage hole has become tightly blocked by old roots or debris? Is the wonderful protective mulch we talked about earlier accidentally piled far too high and pressing directly against the fragile, rot-prone stems? Is there simply enough natural warm sunlight and gentle moving airflow for the beautiful dense foliage to quickly and thoroughly dry out after a heavy summer rain shower?
Correcting the physical environment, which essentially means just giving the plant the breathing space, moving air, and proper balanced moisture it naturally prefers, completely solves the vast majority of these frightening issues, long before they ever become serious enough to warrant any kind of harsh chemical intervention. We deeply want our gardening experience to be easy, natural, and safe, not a constant, expensive battle with confusing sprays and toxic treatments. And while you are calmly, peacefully looking at the leaves, there is one more very specific, incredibly quick, completely effortless visual check that is absolutely, entirely worth your time in the hot month of July. Gently, carefully turn a few of the middle leaves over and closely inspect the hidden undersides. We are specifically looking for the presence of spider mites.
Spider mites become incredibly active, highly aggressive, and they reproduce incredibly rapidly in very hot, exceptionally dry weather, which perfectly describes July and August in many of our growing regions. Because these annoying tiny pests are practically microscopic and nearly completely invisible to the naked human eye, you will almost always spot the physical damage they leave behind long before you ever actually spot the tiny, crawling mites themselves. The telltale damage strongly looks like a very fine, pale, dotted speckling directly across the top surface of the leaf, almost exactly as if someone lightly, carelessly dusted the beautiful green foliage with a very fine, pale yellow powder. The affected leaf begins to slowly, sadly lose its rich, healthy green color and looks generally exhausted, dull, and sickly.
If you happen to catch this highly common issue early during one of your peaceful, observant garden walks, the brilliant solution is beautifully simple, highly effective, and requires absolutely zero harsh chemicals or heavy lifting. Spider mites absolutely fundamentally hate moisture, rain, and high humidity. By simply keeping the surrounding soil consistently evenly moist, and merely taking your standard garden hose and deliberately knocking the undersides of the affected leaves with a firm, steady, sweeping spray of plain, clean water every few days, you can easily wash them away, disrupt their webs, and naturally handle most light or moderate infestations completely on your own. No heavy lifting, no expensive smelly products, just a gentle, highly effective assist from your everyday garden hose. Now, as we smoothly transition, we have arrived at a vital topic that I know for a fact causes a tremendous, almost paralyzing amount of deep anxiety for absolutely anyone who truly loves growing these magnificent plants. Let us have a very calm, highly reassuring, deeply logical conversation about exactly how to tell the profound difference between true, devastating clematis wilt and ordinary, completely harmless afternoon heat droop. Because needlessly panicking over the wrong one and making a hasty, emotional decision with your sharp pruners can literally and tragically cost you months of beautiful, hard-earned vine growth that you absolutely, positively did not need to sacrifice. There are very few words or phrases in the entire gardening world that make passionate clematis growers more nervous, sweaty, and apprehensive than the dreaded words clematis wilt. The immediate, deeply natural human instinct, the very second a gardener sees a beloved stem looking incredibly limp, sad, and completely lifeless, is to immediately assume that this terrible, unstoppable disease has officially arrived. And in a state of sheer, understandable panic, they start aggressively cutting the whole beautiful plant completely down to the bare ground, desperately hoping to save the root system. But we deeply need to pause, take a step back, and understand something highly crucial and deeply comforting. Not every single wilted clematis actually has clematis wilt. In fact, in the blazing, oppressive, baking heat of July, it is completely, perfectly, and biologically normal for a climbing vine to look a bit tired and sad. This is especially and specifically true for those magnificent, highly bred, large-flowered hybrid varieties that are currently putting so incredibly much internal energy into sustaining their massive, stunning blooms.
During the absolute hottest, most utterly punishing part of the late afternoon, when the summer sun is fiercely baking the patio stones and the air feels thick and heavy, the plant will very often look slightly, noticeably droopy. The beautiful green leaves might hang straight down limply. The thin stems might temporarily lose some of their rigid, upright posture. This is simply a brilliant, highly effective biological coping mechanism. The intelligent plant is intentionally, deliberately reducing its exposed flat surface area to the harsh sun in order to heavily conserve its vital, limited internal moisture. And the absolute key indicator, the golden rule that guarantees this is nothing to worry about, is that as the late evening slowly approaches, as the fierce sun finally dips lower below the horizon, and the soothing, cool night air gently rolls in, the plant will absolutely recover fully on its own. By the very next morning when you step out with your coffee, it will look perfectly perky, crisp, hydrated, and completely healthy again. That temporary alarming afternoon sagging is just a perfectly natural, harmless heat response. It is absolutely not a fungal disease, and it requires absolutely no aggressive action or pruning from you whatsoever, other than simply ensuring the potting soil is adequately and properly watered. True clematis wilt, the actual genuine fungal disease that we truly want to watch out for, looks drastically different to the trained eye, and it behaves entirely differently. True wilt absolutely does not patiently wait for a hot baking afternoon to strike. Instead of gradually looking a little tired over several hot sunny days, a completely, perfectly healthy, vibrant green stem will tragically collapse almost entirely overnight. The leaves on that one specific targeted stem will rapidly turn jet black or a very dark, sickly, unnatural brown. Any lovely open flowers currently attached to that exact stem will aggressively shrivel and die incredibly fast. The entire affected stem will literally look exactly as though its vital internal water supply was instantly and violently cut off with a pair of sharp scissors, simply because the microscopic fungus has completely blocked the internal vascular plumbing system inside the stem. And here is the absolute most telling, undeniable symptom of all. While that one specific, unfortunate stem completely collapses and turns black, the rest of the entire plant, all the neighboring stems right next to it on the very same trellis, will very often stay perfectly fine, beautifully green, and wonderfully healthy. If you ever walk out to your quiet garden or sunny balcony and actually see this sudden, highly dramatic collapse of just a single stem, the absolute most important thing I can ever tell you is this. Please, I beg you, do not panic. And absolutely do not rip the whole heavy plant out of the ground or drag the heavy container to the trash. Do not throw away your beautiful, beloved plant. Instead, simply take a deep breath and carefully follow that one single affected stem all the way down, tracing it carefully toward the very base of the plant. Take a small pair of clean, sharp garden pruners, that you have quickly, easily wiped with a little rubbing alcohol or a simple household disinfectant wipe. And cleanly, calmly, cut that damaged stem entirely back. You want to deliberately make your clean cut several inches below the visibly black, damaged section, making absolutely sure you are cutting directly into clean, green, healthy-looking tissue. Then, and this is highly important for the overall hygiene of your patio space, carefully dispose of that diseased black plant material securely in your sealed household trash bag, completely removing it from the immediate area, rather than carelessly tossing it into your open garden compost pile, where the resilient fungus might easily survive and spread. Now here is the beautifully reassuring, deeply wonderful part of the story. The incredible piece of botanical information that should completely and permanently change your reaction to this whole stressful situation. When you initially plant a clematis in the ground, or when you carefully pot it up for your patio container, it is generally universally recommended to plant the main root ball a few inches deeper than it originally sat in the thin plastic nursery pot you bought it in. This is absolutely not a random accident or a silly suggestion. We purposely plant them deeply, specifically so that there are several healthy, sleeping, completely dormant leaf buds buried safely and securely below the soil level, completely protected from any above-ground fungal diseases, harsh winds, and freezing winter weather. If a beautiful, mature summer stem is unfortunately lost to wilt, and you gracefully, calmly prune it away as we discussed, those hidden, buried, protected buds act as a brilliant, built-in biological safety net. Very often, within just a few short, surprising weeks, you will beautifully see fresh, brand new, perfectly healthy green replacement growth eagerly pushing right up from the dark soil to gracefully take its place. The grand, overarching lesson here is absolutely not to live in constant fear of wilt. The true lesson is to calmly, patiently, and correctly identify the exact symptoms before you make a drastic, highly permanent decision with your pruners that you really, truly did not need to make.
Gardening should always bring you deep peace, quiet satisfaction, and joy, not panic. And deeply knowing the visual difference between a thirsty, hot plant and a diseased plant gives you the ultimate confidence to just relax, put the pruners down, and thoroughly enjoy the process. As we slowly move into the much later part of the long summer, we also deeply need to rethink and completely adjust exactly how we are feeding our beloved vines. Let us talk openly about exactly why July is absolutely, unequivocally not the month for a heavy, aggressive, complicated feeding program, but rather it is a crucial time for steady, highly balanced, and quiet recovery. When the spectacular, massive spring flower show finally fades away, inevitably leaving the vine looking a little bare and exhausted, the immediate, completely understandable human instinct for many loving gardeners is to rush right out and hit the tired plant with another heavy, concentrated round of strong fertilizer. We logically think that if we just give it more rich food, we can forcefully push it right back into glorious, vibrant bloom. But in the heavy, oppressive heat of July, this well-intentioned, caring strategy almost always backfires entirely. Applying a strong, highly concentrated, high-nitrogen fertilizer right now forcefully compels the plant to aggressively produce a massive, frantic flush of lush, soft, incredibly fast green leaf growth. It might honestly look wonderfully impressive and thick for a few short days, but the harsh reality is that actual, desired flower production slows down dramatically and often stops entirely. Why? Because the confused plant is being chemically forced to invest absolutely all of its precious, limited internal energy into making heavy green leaves instead of delicate, beautiful flower buds. Furthermore, that very soft, rapidly forced, highly unnatural new green growth is structurally incredibly weak. It is significantly more vulnerable to sudden, severe drought stress when the summer rain stops. It is far more susceptible to devastating fungal diseases because the cell walls are stretched thin and weak, and it is easily shredded, bruised, or broken by the physical damage of heavy, unpredictable summer thunderstorms. If your beautiful clematis is comfortably planted directly in the ground, in decent average garden soil that has been lightly, occasionally amended with a bit of natural dark compost over the years, it honestly may need very little, if absolutely any, extra feeding right now. Nature is usually quietly providing exactly what it needs to sustain itself. However, I know very well that many of you are lovingly, carefully growing your clematis in large, beautiful decorative containers on your patios and sunny balconies to avoid the heavy digging. Container-grown vines are the one strict exception to this no-feeding rule. Because we are watering these contained pots regularly, often daily in the extreme summer heat, that constant heavy downward flow of water slowly and inevitably flushes the essential, water-soluble nutrients right out of the bottom drainage hole of the potting mix, much, much faster than they would ever deplete in the open ground. For these specific containerized plants, a very light, very gentle, highly diluted application of a balanced, all-purpose liquid feed, perhaps mixed carefully at only half the recommended strength on the bottle, just once after that first major flush of spring flowers fades, is usually more than enough to gently sustain it. But absolutely regardless of exactly where your plant is currently growing, by the time we finally reach the sticky days of late July, you want to completely stop feeding the plant altogether. Simply put the heavy bags and bottles of fertilizer away in the shed.
The core, fundamental goal at this advanced point in the warm season is absolutely not to force another frantic, exhausting growth spurt. The true goal is steady, quiet, highly mature growth that gently supports any current lingering flowering, while slowly, deliberately, and carefully building up the deep internal energy reserves the plant absolutely needs to safely survive the coming freezing winter and eventually deliver an absolutely breathtaking, jaw-dropping show for you next year. This is the absolute essence of beautiful, low-stress gardening. We are peacefully allowing the plant to do what it naturally wants to do, supporting it gently without constantly pushing, pulling, or chemically forcing it to perform. And speaking of vital support, there is one final, incredibly practical, surprisingly easy task that almost never, ever makes it onto those standard, generic, highly technical clematis care lists you constantly see online. Yet taking just 5 easy minutes to do this simple check can literally save an entire season's worth of beautiful, hard-earned growth. We deeply need to check the physical supports firmly holding the heavy vine, well before a sudden, violent summer storm aggressively checks them for you. By the time midsummer truly arrives, your lovely, vigorous vine has highly likely added several feet of dense, heavy, thickly layered new growth. This simply means there is significantly more physical surface area, a much larger, denser wall of solid green leaves, for the wind to catch, exactly like a ship's sail during a heavy, blowing storm.
A standard wooden trellis, a delicate thin wire grid, or a lightweight decorative patio arbor that easily, effortlessly held up just fine in the gentle, soothing breezes of early spring, can suddenly and disastrously fail, snap, and completely collapse without any warning whatsoever once that heavy, water-filled summer leaf load dramatically increases. And because those mature, older clematis stems at the very bottom have become extremely thick, heavily woody, and incredibly brittle with age, a heavy, overgrown vine that suddenly falls over and hits the patio often cannot be saved or repaired. The physical damage to the woody stems is permanent and devastating. So please, take a lovely, highly relaxing walk around your patio or garden this week. Spend a few easy, stress-free minutes just looking closely at the physical structure. Check the metal screws securely holding the wooden trellis to the brick wall. Gently wiggle the metal mounting brackets to ensure they are tight. Gently tug on the plastic or cloth ties. If you used any natural, rustic garden twine in the damp spring, strictly check to see if it has gone completely dry, frayed, and highly brittle from baking in the intense summer sun, and simply, easily replace it if it feels weak or ready to snap. Look very closely for any thick, woody stems that might be rubbing repeatedly and aggressively against a rough piece of wood or a sharp metal edge every single time the wind blows. That constant daily friction slowly, invisibly damages the thin, protective outer bark, inevitably creating an open, weeping wound and providing an incredibly easy, direct entry point for devastating diseases.
As you are gently, peacefully guiding the new soft growth this month, exactly as we discussed earlier, make a very conscious, intentional effort to spread the delicate green stems widely and evenly across the entire support structure, rather than just lazily letting them pile up into a heavy, tangled, dense mop at the very top. This one simple, highly gentle adjustment vastly and instantly improves the natural, cooling airflow directly through the dense leaves, naturally keeping the plant much healthier, and it brilliantly distributes the heavy, dangerous wind load far more evenly across the whole physical structure, keeping absolutely everything safe, secure, and beautiful when the unpredictable summer weather suddenly turns rough. As we finally bring all of these incredibly simple, highly easy, back-saving practices together, I truly want you to step back, take a deep breath, and look at the beautiful bigger picture of your peaceful garden. Taking care of your patio, your sunny balcony, or your private backyard oasis should absolutely always be a profound source of deep joy, quiet contemplation, and deep relaxation. Never, ever a source of constant anxiety, stress, or endless, heavy, exhausting chores. July is a deeply transitional month in the garden. It is absolutely not just about desperately, anxiously trying to hold on to this season's fading, tired flowers. It is fundamentally about quietly, thoughtfully, and gently shaping, securing, and guaranteeing next year's magnificent, colorful display too. Providing highly consistent, very gentle watering deeply through the dry spells, rather carefully checking the soil moisture, rather than just indiscriminately flooding the heavy pots only when they look absolutely desperate. Maintaining beautifully healthy, completely disease-free leaves by simply ensuring good, clean airflow and practicing simple, quiet observation from your patio chair.
Keeping those delicate climbing stems properly, safely, and securely supported against the unpredictable summer winds without tying them too tight. And offering highly moderate, incredibly calm care rather than stressful, excessive feeding and harsh, aggressive, panicked pruning. All of these incredibly simple, low-effort, highly mindful actions work quietly and beautifully together in perfect harmony to slowly build a much stronger, vastly more resilient vine that is entirely, completely capable of delivering a far better, more spectacular, jaw-dropping floral show next year. The absolute greatest secret to gardening gracefully, successfully, and happily as we get a little older and wiser is to simply consciously resist the sudden, nagging urge to constantly keep fixing the plants every few days. These magnificent, ancient clematis vines respond so much beautifully better to calm, highly reliable consistency than they ever do to constant, anxious, hovering intervention. What you are gently doing today, with just a few peaceful minutes of relaxed observation and highly gentle care, is not just saving the few remaining August flowers. You are expertly, masterfully laying a strong, deeply healthy, permanent foundation for a truly breathtaking floral show next year that will make you smile every time you walk outside. I would absolutely love to hear all about the beautiful plants you are currently nurturing in your own outdoor spaces. Please, take a quiet moment to drop a comment below and tell me, exactly what kind of clematis are you currently growing on your sunny patio or in your garden? Do you have one of those massive, show-stopping, large-flowered hybrids? An elegant, delicate Viticella? A highly vigorous, sprawling Montana? Or perhaps something completely different that you absolutely adore? And tell me, what is the single biggest, most frustrating challenge your beautiful vine is dealing with right now in the thick summer heat? I read absolutely every single comment, and your personal experiences and highly practical questions directly shape exactly what we cover on this channel to help you grow a vastly more beautiful, deeply relaxing garden with significantly less physical effort. Thank you so much for spending this quiet, peaceful time with me today. Now, go pour yourself something wonderful and refreshing, step outside to deeply enjoy your beautiful garden space, and always remember to gently check those roots before you look at the flowers.